Welcome everyone to the Eternal patch breakdown for patch 1.28.7, which is not going to be a full breakdown yet because we don't know everything about it, but for once we're going to get it out ahead of the patch, so that'll be nice. A lot of notes have been released about the upcoming balance changes, so we're going to talk about those in particular. This is going to be the balance patch breakdown, and then if there are any features or new changes in the patch, this is looking like a pre-release patch to me. I would say that it is pretty likely to contain some other features, but I'm not sure. But we have so much stuff to consider in terms of card balance that we're going to do that in a separate video if we talk about it at all. So the main thing is that a huge amount of cards have been changed, and they have actually done just like a lot of interesting balance fixes and balance changes overall. There's a little bit of follow-up to the previous big balance patch, which, you know, is actually to be expected, or sort of to be expected. There were certain cards that I was looking at a little bit askance now that Steward of the Past has been nerfed, and we're seeing a little bit less of that kind of void hate. And now that the changes have sort of stuck, and I'm sure that they looked at the numbers, we are seeing some new changes coming out, as well as a bunch of things that are not related to that and are more related to improving the experience of Eternal and improving like just sort of the what's the word, the viability of all of my favorite stuff. Like, there's a lot of cool decks that are going to be more interesting and more viable as a result of the upcoming balance changes. So let's talk about first the major balance changes, and then we'll talk about there's going to be some mild draft changes, and there's going to be some other cards that got buffed that are specifically just sort of like the underplayed styles. They tend to be really, really interesting cards. We've built decks around them before, and there's going to be a lot of those that we can start looking at and having a lot of fun with as well. So alright, first things first, Pathfinder and Trailblazer. Elysian, Pathfinder, and Trailblazer have gotten the big nerf bat. They moved up an influence in the previous patch, and it looks like they are just not getting hit hard enough. So because Echo Mocto is just everywhere right now with Steward of the Past stuff going on, and because Trailblazer and Pathfinder have both been consistently sources of like really ridiculous problems, lots of infinite combo decks. Echo Second Sight has always been my favorite. Pathfinder, of course, does like the infinite Mocto stuff, does infinite Piercing Griefs, does infinite Stone Patter Alchemists, and Stone Patter Alchemists are cheaper now. So there's a lot of things going on that are pretty rough there. So they've gone up to 7. And this is big bummer for me. Not Pathfinder so much. I didn't really like Pathfinder. I never really found giving units Echo to be as exciting as giving like more spells Echo, unless you're playing a Crown deck, and with Crown like not really doing the same things, it doesn't really matter too much to me. So like overall, this seems like a healthy nerf for the meta, because Infinite Mocto is kind of a pretty bad pattern. It tends to be a weird deck with just a late game that certain people just can't conquer. You gotta be kind of careful about those decks, and I'm more or less in favor of the change to Pathfinder. Trailblazer, however, it's time to say farewell to Carpet Shuffle. So Trailblazer costs the same as Pathfinder, and I'm afraid that that means that we are very unlikely to be seeing any more Echo Static Bolt decks moving around. And like, so yeah, like previously we were able to do some pretty fantastic things with that card. The Infinite Second Sight combo is just one of the funniest and most amazing things in Eternal, and being able to do it on turn 4 or 5 in a 4-color deck that was quarrying out the Trailblazers was it was an absolute delight. I loved it a lot. I'm very sad to see it go. It's not gone for good, though. It's simply been consigned to the dustbin of jank. We will be able to play that deck still, but with the Trailblazer itself costing 7, I'm afraid there's not much else that we can do. So, a little bit sad there. But all the same, like with those two cards being changed, like we should see a little bit less of some of the ridiculousness that Eternal has like been really well known for, and this is like a very sad day, but overall, at least in terms of Pathfinder, I think it's pretty healthy for the game. So we'll see how it goes. I am gonna miss Trailblazer, but it seems to have to be sort of equal with Pathfinder at the moment, and you know, maybe someday they'll bring it back. It sounded like from the official patch notes, one of the things they are talking about is to pull way back on the power level until a sufficient quantity and quality of counterplay can arise. So we might see these cards coming back someday. But until that happens, these cards will remain at 7, and they'll be a lot more out of reach. If you want that infinite late game, you'll have to work for it. You'll have to do it at the end of the game, as opposed to in the middle of the game, and such is the life. So the next one is actually a pretty big one. Vara Fate Touched has been changed. So Vara now reads whenever you play another shadow unit instead of Vara or another shadow unit, which is what she used to say. So originally Vara, when played, would bring back a unit from the void, another shadow unit from the void, the instant she was played, which meant she was immediate value and was by far the best Scion in the cycle. I think of all of the other 5, no one saw more play than Vara. She was kind of a champion of the just ridiculous shadow reincarnation deck, and with Steward of the Past getting nerfed, Vara, it turns out, is just too good. So she's actually getting changed to no longer be quite as aggressive as she used to be. You can't Grasping at Shadow Vara and get back a thing. You can't chain Vara into other Varas, into other Varas. You really have to work for that resurrection engine to work now. And so I think Film Reanimator is actually kind of going by the wayside. This is a very big nerf to that deck, and I don't know if it's going to be able to recover from this particular setup. Vara's still probably a reasonably powerful card. She does have to work in a lot more confined space now. Being able to bring units back from the void is very tough for her. It's going to require her to play 1-drop shadow units if she wants the instant value. If she sticks on the board, she's still going to provide you with a lot of value over time. She's still going to give you those games where you just have everything out of your void and into play. But I would say that this is a really substantive nerf. And overall, I would not actually rate Vara as the most powerful Scion anymore. I'd probably put that probably around, oh gosh, there's a couple of them, right? We got Eileen and Caleb, who both have pretty good immediate impacts, and Talir, whose sort of summon effect is a little bit more reliable, I think, than Vara's. Yeah, she's in the same vein as Talir now, where she doesn't have immediate board impact, but she does have the ability to spiral a game out of control. And I would say she's probably a little less powerful than Talir in that case. So, that's a bit of a bummer. Next up. So Vara Fate Touched has been nerfed. Another card that has been nerfed as a result of the Steward of the Past nerf is Soulfire Drake. This one's been getting the nerf bat over and over again. It's a dominant card, and I don't think it's worse or that much worse now. This is something that you can actually play with. As a 5/2 with charge with a really good Entomb ability, I don't think the cost of this is going to be super prohibitive. This does mean that this card is now about the same cost. Now, no longer the thing that you play instead of Obliterate. It's now something that you really have to weigh whether or not it fits into your deck. So, oh, and it is a dragon, yes. These are all mock-ups, so some of the information might be missing from the unit types in particular. But if I get something wrong, please don't comment on the YouTube video, because we'll have actual things set up there. Okay, so yeah, Soulfire Drake is still a dragon, but as a 5/2, it does still do the same things. It just costs a little bit more. That's a reasonable nerf, and I don't think we're going to see as much of it in particular Stonescar decks. And it was played apparently quite a bit in Rakano and Skycrag, and even a few Praxis decks, which is interesting to note. I didn't see too much of it in Praxis decks, but it is really fun in Praxis decks. So I think we will still see it in all 4 of those archetypes, but it's going to be a lot rarer now. Overall, I would say this is not as significant a nerf as the Vara nerf or the Pathfinder Trailblazer nerf, but they do definitely bring Soulfire Drake's power down a lot. An extra power does put you in a pretty bad place. And the next one is actually an even more significant one, so let's go ahead and go to that one. Protect now costs 2. This card is very strong. This card was very strong, and at 2 it is significantly worse. It's still okay, but it's basically just a green counterspell now. You're not going to see as much of this card in general, and I think this is a significant downer to sort of Argenport style decks in particular. Anything that wants to just put out a unit and keep it protected is going to have a little bit harder time. But on the other hand, this card promoted such ridiculously unfun games against aggro type decks in green. Like, as the ability to play a bunch of gunslingers and then just protect the thing from a torch as you're swinging in for lethal, like, over and over and over again, or to play your Tavrod down and protect that over and over again, like, this could be a really obnoxious card if you just got 4 of it and decent curve. I think that this is a healthy nerf overall. I'm not that sad to see it nerfed. I think this was one of the ones that I most had an eye on as far as like potential nerfs that really needed to go through. And in terms of like cleaning up for like just better player experience, this is one that I'm actually really happy with. I'm sad about Soulfire Drake. I'm sad about Vara. I didn't play Vara a lot, but I'm still sad about her. I'm sad about Trailblazer and Pathfinder. This one makes me very happy. So, like, yeah, like, this is one of those things where it's like, this card just really could be very degenerate, and it can still be degenerate, but it's going to require you to actually get a lot more investment in. And this is not the only Justice card that actually got a significant nerf. We also have a nerf to Wanted Poster. Praise be. Wanted Poster costs 2 now as well. And so, you know, Cursed, the whole thing where you could curse a unit, draw 2 cards as soon as you slayed the unit with an Annihilate or something like that. This card was, I think, really cutting into Primal's color identity. And while it is cool to have a card that essentially gives you just, like, a ridiculous amount of draw for like a cool type quest scenario where you just have to actually like kill the thing, overall this card was pretty degenerate. Like, it was a card that probably needed a look, and it definitely got that look because it needs to be a little bit more expensive to be meaningful in terms of how much draw it is getting you. Justice just having the best draw spell in the game was kind of an issue, and this was just a card where basically every single time that it was played, you would see basically it would be played on the turn, and you would just see Wanted Poster into Annihilate, or Wanted Poster into Slay. You could never interact with Wanted Poster. And what this offers is still very efficient card draw, still very good card draw, in fact, but at this point you can now do some cool interactions with it. You're more likely to be able to, say, to Lear's Intervention the unit back, or teleport the unit, or dig site the unit in all of those fun time options. You're going to be able to silence the unit maybe every now and then. You're going to be able to just do a big pile of cool things, and if your opponent wants to actually just draw 2 cards on the turn guaranteed, he's going to have to wait until like turn 3 or 4, the same time as time decks get their cool draws. That actually puts these draw cards back on the level with other cards, other types of other factions draw, and I think that's really important in terms of just like giving them like that kind of cool conditional draw. So yeah, I'm really into that change, and that should be very good. All right, Stonepetter Alchemist. Stonepetter Alchemist, I mentioned that I was a little bit worried about this one, and it turns out that I was a little bit right. They took Stonepetter Alchemist down from a 2-2 to a 2-1, which I think is a pretty meaningful change. This is the change that made Rakano Artisan much more fair and balanced, and generally, like, it even got taken out of a lot of Armory decks for a while. So, you know, until eventually, like, people sort of started to realize it was good again and bring it back in. And that's sort of what we might see with Stonepetter Alchemist. This card is now killable through Rock Slides and Vara's Favors and all of the cool things that kill Stonepetter Alchemists. And I think that it is still a very good card because it still represents 4 damage to face, plus another 4 damage to face for 3. This card can be absolutely absurd against any sort of control board. It is a card that you really still have to answer, and it's still very tough, but it dies to a lot more incremental damage, and that is actually very meaningful in terms of reducing its power level. This is a very minor nerf to Stonepetter Alchemist, but it is a light enough tap to actually make it still a playable and interesting card. And I think if we're going to be playing Stonepetter Alchemist at 3, I'm happy with this change. So I doubt that they will have to go back and do anything with Stonepetter Alchemist again with this change, but if they do, basically they're just going to have to bring it back up to 4 again. I think that overall, like, this allows you to preserve all the fun shenanigans. Crown Stonepowder, Echo Stonepowder's probably not going to be as big a deal now, but like just straight up Stonepowder fun should be pretty worth it. So yeah, should be cool stuff. All right. More Justice cards getting nerfed. Okay, so now we're looking at Draft in particular. There are some other things that are happening in Draft. Justice is still too good. And now we have Entrapment costing 4. Another change that I'm really in favor of. This was the dominant common removal card. It was really, really interesting because, like, you could get to scenarios where your opponent could basically just Nightfall you and outrun you, and, like, just basically, they could easily see that you had the entrapment in your hand, and then they'd play their Nightfall card, and then they'd attack into you, and that would be a huge weakness in the deck. But that was pretty, like, binary. And a lot of decks really didn't even want to run Nightfall cards all that much, so it really sucked when you were attacking into an entrapment and there really wasn't anything you could do but lose your best unit. So this card, I think, costing 4 is a much more meaningful change. As a common removal spell in Justice, this was just basically Justice's big power tool, and I think this was the card that I was most looking to see nerfed in the previous round of Justice nerfs. So now that it has been nerfed, I think that Justice in Draft should be significantly less dominant. There have been some other changes as well to some less important players, but nonetheless pretty cool ones. So we'll go ahead and take a look at those as well. All right, Spirit Blade Stalker. Pretty sure I got this one right. 4 cost 2/4. Used to pay 5 to give a unit +1/+1 on lifesteal. The ultimate now costs 6. Yeah, I think that this is another card that, while pretty middle of the road, definitely provided Justice with a lot of cool tools, and this is totally fine to have it like sort of be set up. This was a fairly strong card just because of its high versatility. It did really good things with lots of flyers. It did really good things with big units. It did really good things with even some small units that just like had like good evasion on them. So this card was very, very good in Draft, and I think that overall, like, the ability to like set this up was to take that ultimate up a little bit was actually a really good idea. I think this card is a really, really fun Draft card, so I wouldn't want to see it nerfed to the point where it's unplayable, but I do think that that ultimate was in fact worth 6 power, and now that you can pay 6 for it, that's a much more reasonable and healthy way to go about it. And I expect the Draft environment to improve again as a result of this one. The last one, Roosting Owl, I don't know that I care too much about, but this card did caused me a lot of pain in Omens of the Past, so I guess I'm okay with it. As a 2/4, it has now been reduced to a 2/3, and it is still a bird. This card flies and gives you the top unit of your deck strength and health equal to the student's strength and health. Yep. So all of that is lovely. The main thing about this change is that it means that Roosting Owl is a little bit worse on defense, and the turn that you play it, it's not going to be as capable of holding off that big board of sort of like aggressive type units. And that's actually a pretty significant nerf. It means that you're more likely to die on the turn that you play Roosting Owl than you were before, or you're more likely to lose value from Roosting Owl. It's not likely to stick on the board and be a consistent flyer in addition to giving you a very, very powerful bonus, which is to say a very, very large unit. So typically Roosting Owl wins the game off of the virtue of the large unit that you are playing off the top of your deck, but it is also just a reasonable flyer across, and I think that the minor nerf to its survivability is gonna be just fine. I don't have an opinion about this one way or the other. I think that it's probably just gonna do, exactly that. It's basically just going to do exactly that thing of make it a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more likely to die in the chump on the turn that it mentors. So yeah, overall, it's a very, very minor nerf to Justice, but it's, we saw some really, really big ones, and this card was kind of obnoxious, and this makes it significantly less obnoxious, I think. So yeah, I'm pretty into it. All right, so those are the Justice Draft changes, and there is, in addition to those nerfs, one rework. So let's go ahead and look at that, and hopefully I've got this one right. Last Light Druid. All right, Last Light Druid was a 1/5 for 3 that had Summon, Nightfall, other units you play at night transform into random units with cost 1 or greater. Now it has Summon Nightfall when you end a turn at night, transform each other unit that you played into a random unit with cost 1 or greater. So, overall, I would say this is a bit of a nerf to the card, but it does allow you to play a Last Light Druid deck that plays a lot of very powerful summon effects, and there are many cards that have very weak stat lines but very good summon effects, and Last Light Druid will now be able to play with those cards in a pretty fun way. The main thing about it is that this does like sort of reduce the ability of this card to improve. This reduces the ability of this card to have like immediate impact on the board. Like it just immediately upgraded all of your units in a way that was kind of useful. I think that it's mostly a side grade. It doesn't do anything big or strong or do anything big or small to the card, but it does mean that you are going to be playing a lot less of your sort of like random vanillas that you have into the Last Light Druid off of like Mind Link decks. However, it means that you can build a deck around Last Light Druid and actually have that work. So it definitely gives you a lot more jank potential. I don't think it is a more powerful card as a result, but it is a more powerful card in decks built around Last Light Druid, so that's totally good. Yeah, I think it's overall a significant improvement to the card's design, and yeah, it's pretty neat. Okay, we're through the nerfs and the reworks. Now we get to the exciting part, the buffs. There are a lot of them. Into the Furnace is a fast spell now. That's a pretty good change. As a 2-cost deal 2 damage, this card is pretty gross, and I'd say that this is a really, really significantly high buff to fire. Grenadin-based decks are going to be a lot happier with Into the Furnace. This is a card that can deal 4 damage to a unit at fast spell speed, which means that it is essentially just one of your better removal cards. This card is actually probably one of the best common removal cards in the Dusk Road. So overall, this is a huge change, and I think it's going to be like really, really meaningful if you are playing Grenadin, and even if you are not, you're still going to be pretty happy with a fast spell Alchemical Blast type effect at 2 in red. That's not too bad of a deal. So yeah, basically the double damage is really, really meaningful, and the extra damage is just like a pretty big deal. This gives you a very, very good tool in fire. I would not say... Yeah, I'm of the opinion that it's a very, very strong removal card. I'm not sure if it's the strongest removal card. I did say that, but I'm thinking now there's still plenty of good shadow cards, and Entrapment's still pretty okay. But this is very flexible, this is very usable. You're going to want this basically as a pickup almost every time in Fire, and it's going to really make a difference in your Fire decks. So definitely, definitely cool. Topple Tower. Alright, this card is almost ranked playable now. Probably not. This is a 3-cost 0/5 with +2 strength for each granite in your void. It was a 0/4. That extra point of health is pretty crazy. This card was previously like already not torchable, and now it just becomes kind of a huge monster. I'm pretty excited about this in draft. This means that you can just have like a really, really hard to kill, fairly aggressive, like this thing's going to be like an 11/5 in draft. He's going to be doing a lot of stupid stuff, and you can potentially build some ranked decks with him now where you can just like charge with him. I don't think it changes his ranked viability very much because most of the stuff that can kill 4-cost cards can kill 5-cost cards, but he's still kind of nuts, and he's got an exceptional amount of stats for his cost now, which is something that might actually make him worth considering in ranked decks, although I kinda doubt it because he's just not doing enough and he's so conditional. But in draft, this card is just going to be very, very strong because it now trades into most units very well, and it already had the ability to just become fairly destructive and crazy. So yeah. All right, Amaran Shoveler is next. Yeah, Topple Tower is rare. All right. So Amaran Shoveler was pay 2 to exhaust and look at the top card of your deck. Now it is pay 1, and thank you for the sub, Dahamugo. Cheers, man. You're on YouTube. Okay, so pay 1 and pay 1 and exhaust Amaran Shoveler. Look at the top card of your deck. I was just starting to play with this card, and I was actually really enjoying it. It is very hard to activate this card most of the time, and now it is very, very easy. So I think that this makes this card very ranked viable. There are a couple of decks that we have been building around with Invoke the Waystones, with high Sentinel costs, with high Relic costs. I think that's just going to make this card super playable in the format, and as a ranked card, I'm really, really excited about it. In terms of draft, it doesn't actually change too much. The cost of the effect was not really the thing that was prohibiting you from using it, so if you can build an Amaran Shoveler deck, it's going to be better. And you can build Amaran Shoveler decks in draft. but I would say that overall this is a ranked buff more than a draft buff, and it's a pretty significant ranked buff. I think this card is actually going to see some play. Explorers actually got a lot of cool tools. Apparently they weren't being played with enough, and even though we were giving it our best shot, there's some pretty cool stuff. Okay, so Lunar Magus is the next one, and this card is going from a 2/4 to a 3/4. So it was not a terribly strong card before, but it was fairly good in draft as a Stonewall, and it was pretty okay in some Life Force decks as well. You could just really get a lot done with it, and that meant a lot. Yeah, this card is pretty decent. It's got a lot of really good stats for a 3 cost. In double time, that's a little bit meaningful in draft, but overall this means that you have a 3/4 for 3, which is not at all a terrible stat line. Like, that is still below Vanquish, and it's actually a lot more aggressive. It is probably a better Rakano... Someone's saying Rakano hate stats? Yeah, it is just probably a better card for its ability to be under Vanquish and be over Torch, and still have a lot of pressure, and also do cool things at night. Like, that's all really good. This card is actually going to make Xenon a lot better in ranked. So looks like it's going to be really, really cool. And I do think that this is a very meaningful change. It's going to make Xenon Life Force decks a little bit more viable. And there's one change coming up for Xenon Life Force decks that's going to make this one a lot of fun. All right, there's actually 2 changes coming up, because the next one that we're going to be talking about is Reliquary Raider. And oh boy. Oh boy, is the Reliquary Raider change insane. Was a 5-cost 4/4, with when it attacks, draw a card, and when she blocks, gain 4. Really powerful attack trigger, really powerful block trigger. The stats just never made it. Like, you never saw this card. The new Reliquary Raider is a 3-cost for double time influence for a 1/3. And instead of gaining 4 health, it gains 3 health, but still has the same attack trigger of draw a card. So that's a pretty significant rework of the card, but one that is going to make it a lot more playable, I would say. This is still going to be very torchable, it's going to be very easy to remove, but it costs so much less that it is actually going to be kind of absurd, I think. And the reason that I think that is because we do not have a consistent attack trigger of that kind at 3. Like, there's not a way to draw cards like that every single turn when attacking. So you could just play Reliquary Raider in a deck that has a big pile of, like, Elysian control stuff with Permafrosts and Eye of Winter, any sort of, like, straight removal. You could do blue, yellow, purple, you could do blue, yellow, red, and Reliquary Raider will just consistently draw you cards and then also eventually chain you into that delightful blue card, the Jotun Feastcaller. So you could definitely get Reliquary Raider to draw you an awful lot of cards if your removal base is strong enough and your opponent is not answering Reliquary Raider properly. That's a really important thing. In addition, that 3 health gain is still really relevant. If you're blocking just 2/2s, that is a pretty good Stonewall. This really answers a lot of sort of scary threats, and it gives you some pretty cool tools to deal with very, very small units. Most of the time, they're going to be able to deal 3 damage to your unit if they're doing small units, but it's nonetheless very helpful, and the more of them that you have, the more ridiculous it gets. If you can buff this with Xenon Obelisk, that's a pretty big deal, but mainly I just think that the consistent card advantage that this card offers is actually crazy, and I think that because they definitely picked the correct stat line here, because anything else would be insane. It does not give you any pressure, and it does not trade very well, but because it so frequently gets to attack just to replace itself at 3, it is yet another cool time tool to get through your deck and to potentially generate an infinite amount of value. And also, it's an explorer, so it's going to benefit from all the cool explorer stuff, like Dig Site, which you never see played, but you're sure going to see played with Reliquary Raider. You can use Talir's Intervention to bring this card back when your opponent torches it. That one's going to be really crazy. You can do, like, Xenon Obelisk stuff. You can play around with all sorts of cool things, and yeah, no, this card is going to be kind of nuts. You can give this extra health with that weird dinosaur that gives the thing with the least health extra health. Like, there are a lot of ways that you can make Reliquary Raider more resilient and still play it on 3. And that, I think, means that this card is going to be relatively playable and relatively powerful. However, it does not have any pressure. It does not have any ability to end the game. So you still need to have a deck that can do that. And if your Reliquary Reader deck can do that, then more power to you. I think Mystic Ascendant will help you out with that. I think Jotun Feast Color, I think any sort of like Elysian mid-range stuff is going to be really fun. This should be a really, really big buff to Elysian stuff in particular, but it should be also mostly good with Explorers. So I'm pretty down with this one. That was a cool change. All right, Seasoned Spelunker's next. Seasoned Spelunker. Oh, this one's actually a pretty big change to a deck that we just built, which is Explorer Prixis. And this was a card that was not particularly strong in Explorer Prixis, but I actually ended up cutting it from Explorer Prixis just because of how poorly it was doing. And now it's going to be doing a little bit better, so I'm fairly down with it. Explorer Prixis got a lot of buffs here, so we will definitely do a card breakdown. I was going to do a brew on it, I think, last night, and I held off because I wasn't quite sure if it was ready. And now there's going to be so many card changes that we're going to have to do that next week. Okay, so Seasoned Spelunker. This card is 3 cost +1/+1/+1 when you have a relic. It now gets +2/+2 when you have a relic, which means that you can get a 3 cost 5/5. 3 mana 5/5 is pretty good. The only other card that can do that is False Prince, and that is at an influence cost that is frankly outrageous. So this card can easily activate itself while ramping you, which is a pretty important thing. It works very well with Power Stones in general, so that's going to be pretty important. I think that overall, Explorer Relics, I've been exploring this particular theme for quite a while, actually, and I have felt that it is a little underpowered, but I really do feel that the power is mostly there. So it just needed a few more cards that actually worked with the relics, and one of the reasons why it needed more of those cards was because Seasoned Spelunker didn't. So now that you have Seasoned Spelunker, you now have a 1 cost 3/3, you have a 2 cost 4/2, and you have a 3 cost 5/5, all of which you can play if you have any sort of relic, including cards like Miner's Musket, and all your small relic weapons. You can do Talon and Nostrixy stuff. You can do Power Stone. You can do Prixis, and Prixis now actually has a place. I think that yeah, that one's going to be a lot of fun to play around with. And yeah, in addition, just like straight obelisking is certainly not a bad deal. Infinite Hourglass is cool with this. There's a lot of cool things that you can explore here, and I think that we can actually get an Explorer aggro style deck up and running with a decent win rate as a result of the Seasoned Spelunker change. So that's pretty cool. So Stirring Sand was the card that got you back Sentinels from your Void, and it cost 5, but you could pay 2 extra to exhaust it to play additional Sentinels from your Void, which made it a pretty solid draft card and an actually decent enough ranked card. Like, people were actually playing with this even though it wasn't particularly good. It was mostly just like a bad Grasping at Shadow for Sentinels, which I can certainly live with. Now it costs 4, and the Sentinel that you play is exhausted. So as far as the exhaust part goes, that's almost not even an issue. Like, Stirring Sand is going to be able to play Heart of the Vaults for 4 from your Void, and if you lose out on a block as a result of that, that's not really the thing that's bothering you. I think you're going to be just fine with that change overall. If you're playing a Sandstorm Titan from your Void, it readies up again anyways. How many of your Sentinels actually have Endurance? Quite a decent amount. There are going to be times when Stirring Sand no longer like saves you from death, but because it is a huge value card, and because it is now a cheaper value card that's actually giving you more value, I think this is an overall buff to the card, and it enables some cool Void-based strategies with Stirring Sand that might previously not have been available. So, more cool Explorer Sentinel buffs. I'm glad to see these changes because I do think that this is an unexplored area, but all in all, pretty good. Okay, next up is Parapet Sentry. I didn't even see this one, but it actually falls into the same setup as what we were talking about before. So Parapet Sentry is the card that is a 4/3 that has +1/+1 when you have a relic, and deals 3 damage to the enemy player and 3 damage to a unit with flying. It was a pretty good draft card. It was a card that I always really liked in Relic Matters because that extra damage to the face is really cool, and the ability to shoot the 2/3 out of the air. What is the name of that card? Unseen Commando. the ability to shoot Unseen Commando and Valkyrie Enforcer and Tinker Overseer and all of the like ridiculous Argenport flyers out of the air made it really, really tempting to me as an alternative to Sandstorm Titan. But it didn't really get there because it didn't have the stats. It has +1/+1 when you have a relic, and that is almost good enough. It's enough to at least activate a Dawnwalker, but it's just like it's so much worse than Sandstorm Titan and killing flyers that I eventually had to sort of nix those plans. But it's gotten additional stats as well. It's now, again, +2/+2 when you have a relic. So this is now going to be a 6/5 for 5. That's a reasonable enough stat line for a unit that also shoots your opponent's face and shoots your opponent's flyers. So this will see some mild play, not a lot, but again, the same types of decks that run the sort of like Seasoned Spelunkers and Reliquary Raiders and all of that stuff, like Explorer Sentinel decks, are going to have some fun with this. I think this is actually pretty playable at this point, and it makes a nice pairing in between Sandstorm Titan and Heart of the Vault. So cool Sentinel deck that should be pretty good. The camera keeps shaking. Yeah, sorry, we're on a kind of unstable table. I'm trying to get a desk. I don't have any money. We'll see. All right, Bellowing Thunderfoot is next up. So this is a significant draft buff. I don't think that Bellowing Thunderfoot is seeing a lot of play in dinosaurs at the moment, but I'm always interested in dinosaurs getting more stats, so that might be something that we can actually play around with. Okay, so this is now a 5/5. That doesn't mean a lot in terms of most stuff. It's just a little bit of extra pressure. It's a little bit more stats. Bellowing Thunderfoot was not particularly good on rate, and as a sort of slightly stronger but really way more conditional Jotun, what is the name of that card? The 4 costs 3/3 that stuns. Jotun Frost Mage, I think it's called. This card was not seeing just a lot of play and was kind of a low draft pick. I think it's a higher draft pick now, and I think it actually sees... I don't think it sees any ranked play in dinosaurs still, so this is just like a minor draft buff. Jotun Frostkin, yeah, that's why it's hard to remember. It's Frost something. All right, yeah, so, you know, it's gonna be okay. It bonds better with other dinosaurs, someone is pointing out, which is definitely a thing, but overall, like, I don't know if this is a huge or important change. It just makes it slightly better in draft and means that it doesn't feel bad to pick it, so that's pretty good. Thudrock Arctic Artisan was a 5/3. This is the Yeti that deals snowball stuff to your opponent. So overall, I think this change is definitely an improvement. This is one of those cards that I'm guessing they were testing out in the Yeti decks that just wasn't really carrying its weight. People love Thudrock. He's a pretty cool Yeti. He does a lot of cool things. With the extra point of health, he no longer dies to Torch, which is... I mean, that's kind of crucial for a 4-drop. I did not think this card was very good, and I was not interested in crafting it before. Now I am pretty into it. Like, this does a fun thing that is fairly great in Yetis. I'm much more into Yetis now that I've seen LSV's Yeti Party deck sort of in action, and I do kind of like the archetype a bit, and this card was not carrying its weight in that archetype, but it's going to be doing fine now just because of that extra survivability. It is much more likely to get across. It is just better Yeti mid-range, which is nice. And so you might actually see Yeti decks go into mid-range, which I'm always super happy to see, because mostly it's just aggro Yetis, aggro Yetis, aggro Yetis. And there's some interesting mid-range options there, but they just don't have the stats. So giving them the stats definitely opens up some new play opportunities and some new points of viability. And it'll make you excited to get a Thudrock in your legendary pile. So I'm happy with this change. This is cool. This is all feel good. All right. Next up, we got Amethyst Monument. Oh man, this one is actually kind of a big one. So Amethyst Monument has always been sort of the lag behind in the power world. It was a 3/3 Puma that you got off of a power. And overall, that's okay. The Puma has lifesteal, which is not like an unreasonable deal, but nobody played this Monument. Monuments are not seeing a lot of play in general right now, just because Waystones are doing a lot more. So it's fine to bring this card up, which is what has happened. This card is now going to be a 4/4 Puma with lifesteal. So that's a pretty significant buff to the card overall. I think that it does give this card enough presence to see it played in certain ranked decks, particularly Life Force style decks that really want to run something like that. It's also a more reasonable pick in draft as well. So yeah, that seems really, really like a good change. I think overall, just healthy, happy Amethyst Monument. Gonna see a lot more play. Still not gonna be a crazy power card, but it competes with the other monuments a little bit more now, and it doesn't feel bad to play, which is pretty nice. So yeah, that should be kind of cool. Okay, next up. Next on the roster is Cabal Slasher, which is a card that I've always been super unimpressed with, so I'm glad to see it getting the buff that it's getting. And again, we are seeing a slight change sort of to make Xenon Life Force decks more viable, as well as Xenon Life Force as a draft archetype more viable, although I think that ship may have sailed a little bit. It nonetheless actually gives Xenon like some cooler options. So Cabal Slasher is a 1/3 for 3 that gives you extra attack every time that you gain life, and it gives you attack equal to the life gained. So what is changing about it is that it is changing to a 2 cost. So this is going to be 1 cheaper. Okay, so this might have been kind of gross in Omens, but it's significantly less gross now that Omens is gone. And if you are playing a lifesteal type deck with a lot of life gain sources, then Cabal Slasher becomes a really fun type of like interesting card that you can include in that type of deck. So overall, I think that this is going to be a pretty good change to the card. It does make it more aggressive, it makes it more likely to see some play in draft decks, and it means that you actually have some common Life Force cards to pick out of your second pack, which is not unreasonable if you have found like a couple of Grenamenders or something stupid, and you just, you know, like if you're seeing like some Shadow Life Force stuff, this gives you an interesting path to walk down. Overall, the card's not very powerful. I wouldn't pick it. But if you have the Life Force stuff set up already, and then you start seeing like a couple of Life Force cards are open, then you can pick them up in Omens, and you will actually have some ability to sort of play with those cards. And yeah, that's good. I don't know if this is going to be a power card regardless, but I'm barely down with this change. Oh, yeah, so Life Force cards can be interesting and crazy. I don't think this one's ever going to be ranked viable, but at 2, it's a little closer. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see it in a Life Force deck now. Like, Water of Life makes it into a 4/3. It's not going to be an A-tier Life Force deck, but you can maybe do some Life Force aggro with Cabal Slasher now, so I'd think about it at this point. Okay, Iceberg Warchief. This is a weird one. I think this is sort of a side grade, but I think it's actually more of a nerf. Yeah, overall I'm not super pleased with this one. Okay, so Iceberg Warchief is the Yeti that gives your spells +1 damage and your Yeti +1 damage. It's a 5/4, which is a really interesting stat line. And now it becomes a 5/3 that gives your Yeti +2/+0 and your spells +2 damage. So significantly higher risk, significantly higher reward. As a 5-cost card, 3 health is too little for ranked, but the ability to play this card and just give yourself an insane spell damage boost is kind of fun. So if you can figure out ways to make this card stick or give it, in particular, Aegis or protect it with counter spells, then you can actually build a spell damage deck that has a +2 damage ability on it. You can also rally your other Yeti with Iceberg Warchief, which is a crazy, crazy strong effect if you are playing it into an empty power. So if your opponent plays down like their 6-cost unit and like knocks one of your Yeti down, Iceberg Warchief is the thing that just rallies all of your Yetis and gives you a kind of absurd nonsense pull. So that makes me like it a little bit more. However, it's still too vulnerable. I don't love that lost point of health. I do think that +2 spell damage is super fun, so this is a more fun card, but I think a little bit worse. So, yeah. I could be wrong. It could be that it tops out the curve in Yetis, and that's just insane. We will see, but I don't see it being played in ranked. And in draft, I think it's a little bit better. It doesn't trade as well, which is kind of a bummer, but that extra spell damage is much more meaningful, so it should be a fun draft card. Yeah, mostly a side grade, but I think it could certainly do some cool things. And it does make Iceberg Warchief a little more exciting, so I think I'm down with it. Okay, I am the Abductor. Had a 9-cost ultimate that brought units back. Now costs 8. Oh, that's an interesting one. I Am the Abductor is already a pretty strong Xenon card, but Xenon's not seeing a lot of love in this particular setup. As things go, like, it's just had a pretty rough time, and we haven't seen a lot of Xenon decks in general be played. So I Am the Abductor's buff here should certainly improve the deck and give you a little bit more tools. Paying 8 to silence a unit in your void and then play +3/+3 is certainly not bad. Yeah, this is already a good card that people should play in Xenon. The extra ultimate just gives you a bit more interaction and a bit more capacity to play that card. You don't have to be playing Mask of Torment decks to play Ion's ultimate now, and when you're playing Mask of Torment decks, you're going to be able to do things a little bit faster. That's a pretty healthy change overall. It is still a really good card, and it is now slightly more pushed, which is very, very nice. And in particular, it's better in Mask of Torment decks, which brings us to our last, and one of my favorites, Mask of Torment. So Mask of Torment, as you may know from many of our silly brews, I think the Greedthorn one is the main one that we've actually shown on YouTube. Mask of Torment gives you the ability to, whenever you gain life, gain +1 maximum power as a relic ability. It also gives you +1 maximum power just straight to go. So this card costs 5, and that's a little too much. That has always been sort of Mask of Torment's big weakness, is that when you are playing this card, it is just very, very hard to set down onto the board, because the time that you want to set it down is the time when you want to Stray into Shadow or Harsh Rule, or basically the turn that you're going to die. And that's not the turn that you want to be taking off to start ramping with Life Force stuff. You want to be doing that the turn before, so that you can then start extracting to save your life, or Stray into Shadowing to save your life, or just doing a big pile of life gain stuff to gain your life. And as a result, what we are seeing is the change is Mask of Torment now costs 4. That's totally great. I think that's a great improvement to the card. We saw a lot of this card in a Mask deck played by the DWD devs. We've seen a lot of this card in Ironthorn stuff. This makes this card a lot more viable for the reasons that I've already stated. I think that it is a huge and important change, and I think that it is something that can actually bring that sort of Xenon combo deck into the meta. I don't know that the Mask of Torment deck is ever going to be tier 1, but I think it can be tier 2, and as a 4-cost card, that should be quite possible, and I'm excited to try it. We're going to be playing a lot of Mask of Torment stuff again, and that's great, because it's such a fun card. You can do so many stupid things with it. So that's it. That's the whole patch notes. This took almost an hour, so that is good enough for me. We will call it from here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Actually, first, final impressions. Overall, very, very happy with the changes. This looks to me like a big cleanup patch, so they are doing something big very soon. This could be like a prelude to release. This could be something like, just in general, like the point where we start seeing Eternal getting launched as like a more advertised product, or something that people are actually like looking for. This looks like all of the stuff that they, you know, haven't quite gotten to, and just like, yeah, we saw, I think, a big change around like this after Omens, so I don't know, but it looks like it could be looks like we could be seeing a lot of cool things going on. Yeah, overall, a lot of really, really healthy changes. A lot of buffs to cards that I really, really like. A lot of nerfs to cards that were, while they're going to be a little heartbreaking, are somewhat warranted. And those come with like a lot of cool other avenues to explore, so I'm certainly not too bothered by it. The side grades are all really impressive. There are a couple of cards that I don't like quite as much, but for the most part, I think that this is, once again, like looking really, really good in terms of balance. Direwolf has consistently and fairly reliably changed cards in ways that have never caused them to become large problems and have often caused them to become more played or to sort of change up the meta in a way that has actually been really, really good. One of the things that we were talking about, I think the last time that there was a big balance patch, was people were very concerned because Tabrod was a thing. Tabrod's not a thing anymore. It hasn't been like important at all in the meta in the last like 2 weeks. So like they know what they're doing, and I think that like these all look like very logical and interesting changes, and I'm excited to see what comes out of it because it looks like it is just encouraging a complete meta shift of all sorts of stupid fun. I think the gold and diamond and silver and bronze ranks are all going to be much more fun. The master decks might not change too much, but that's okay. You don't want the master decks to change too much. There are actually a couple of like particularly big master hits. So like the Infinite Moctos, I think were maybe making master. I don't know. Gosh, were they? Probably. They were getting played an awful lot anyways. But yeah, so like this looks like a very, very healthy and exciting meta coming along. This looks like the draft changes that we were really, really looking for to make draft more interesting in Duskroad. I think that overall, like, you pick up this patch, you're going to play it, and you're going to have a lot of fun. And everything's going to be different. I'm always a fan of different and awesome. So thank you guys so much for watching. To the YouTube folks, I will see you all later. Have a good night.